the audience a little bit about yourself personally, but also, your company and how long you've been doing what you're doing. And sure, Garrett.
Hey there. Thank you for having me. I'm Garrett Bewkes. I'm the publisher of National Review. So that is a single brand, both in the print and digital space. I've been there since 2016, where I came from the New York Post. And so in my role as publisher, I'm just overseeing all of our operations and trying to grow a very legacy political opinion journal and online presence, bringing it digital first.
How about you, Bonnie?
Hi, I'm Bonnie Fuller. I'm the CEO and editor-in-chief of Hollywood Life. Hollywood Life was part of Penske Media since 2009 when it was launched, and we were part of the She Media division until about 15 months ago, and I took the company independent. And it's been, a great journey. It's been a great journey since 2009. Lots of growth and terrific, both challenges and growth since we've gone independent. Previous to 2009, I had a long career in the magazine business in print and was the editor-in-chief of many large titles, including Marie Claire, Cosmo, and Glamour. And so I've really seen quite a change in media and in women's media. And Hollywood Life is very focused on women and women's interest in entertainment, celebrity, and issues. And so I hope we can talk a bit about that because of how the landscape has just changed so tremendously, and we've had to change along with it.
Cool. I'm Alex Magee, also known as Alan Magee. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Alex Magee. I am the CRO of Savage Ventures. Savage Ventures is based here in Nashville. We're a venture capital company focused on digital assets. The different assets in our portfolio are mostly going to be publishers. So American Songwriter is a 40-year-old music brand that's become the flagship of our portfolio. In the past, we also led and grew in less than about a year, about 2,000%. Outkick.com, which we sold to Fox in the middle of last year during the pandemic, which I'm sure we'll dig a little more into. And then we have a bunch of different brands ranging from D2C brands, but also other publishing brands under Savage Sports and a couple other things we can dig into. So a diverse outlook on different publishing strategies and what that means, particular to the brand and the advertisers involved.
Yeah, perfect. As Steve mentioned, the perspectives on stage may vary greatly. Like this could be a total wrestling match up here if we wanted to talk about content, but in actuality, we're all facing the same challenges in the publisher space, whether it's vendors, third parties, and the audience. So let's start with the fact that, we don't know how anybody can plan for the next 2 years when we look back at the last 2 years being so incredibly unpredictable. So this is going to be an interesting, I hope, conversation and a relatable conversation because we are all challenged with the unpredictability. But we found some common ground and some areas where we can all align and pursue things together. So I think the perspectives will be really helpful. So let's start. The past 2 years have been challenging. Tell us a little bit about how your 2020 to 2022 has changed, what kind of pivots you maybe made in the marketplace. I can say from the She Media perspective, certainly we have seen the first party data challenges coming, and we've all already heard on stage a little bit about that. So that's one common ground. The other area for our space has been holding advertisers more accountable for meaningful spending. In the output of Black Lives Matter, a lot of brands raised their hands and said they're going to start investing more in marginalized communities based on the ownership of a website instead of the audiences. And that's a big shift for how we approach our advertiser community. And so the development of what we call meaningful marketplaces to help the advertisers put their money where their mouths are has been a big initiative of ours. Not just in the last 2 years, certainly more focused in the last 2 years. We've always represented a diverse community of publishers, and having featured, as Bonnie mentioned, a focus on women-owned media for what is now almost 2 decades has been, the crux of our particular business, but expanding that into other areas of marginalized communities, and again, getting the Unilevers, Procters and Gambles of the world to actually spend dollars based on the creator of the content and not just the audiences that they attract has been a big pivot for us. And I'm sure each of you have had similar shifts in your businesses. Alex, why don't we start with some of your pivots?
Yeah, I mean, Savage Adventures was essentially started during the pandemic. So it's a collective of individuals who have digital expertise from marketing to monetization and just general growth across publishers and digital brands. I think one thing that really was pretty crazy was the sale of Outkick and the facilitation of growth in Outkick. In less than a year, like I was saying earlier, it was over 1,000% growth. And I think the main thing that I was attributed to was driving value for the consumer. And I know that's spoken about quite a bit, but what that value was subscription models, was creating the opportunity for users to have comments, and we're taking that to every business we have. Subscription and data, I'm sure we'll talk about that a lot, are absolutely key, but at the end of the day, what it's been, the true meaning is gonna be value, how you're bringing value to the user. So I think the subscriptions are really important, whether that attributes to Web3 or however we want to talk about that, but just generally that one-to-one connection. And even with some of our brands, like American Songwriter, which is more of a legacy brand, started as a print publication, we're finding interesting ways to continue that conversation. Obviously, there's data sets that you get from it being a print publication that you can use in different facets. You know, it's not just push notifications, it's not just email marketing, it's finding new ways to communicate that's not a nuisance to that consumer to drive value. And I know that's a lot of buzzwords. I feel like I'm throwing buzzword. But at the end of the day, it's true. I mean, it's just value. How are you driving that value? And ultimately, how does that attribute to revenue? It's gonna be the advertisers understanding what that value is, how you have that one-to-one connection with your consumer, and ultimately how you're having a native type advertising experience, whether it be through branded content or more general sponsorship opportunities, especially in the wake of no experiential being a part of any strategy in the past couple of years.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I actually, we're sitting alphabetically, but I think logically in the conversation, I'd love to kick it over to Garrett because you've done a lot of also subscription-based management and how your business has had to evolve, in general, of course, but certainly in the last 2 years, what trial and errors, and I think one of the things you said when we were prepping for this is like, I can probably tell people what not to do. So any advice there is also welcomed.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually started moving towards a subscription product in 2017. So we were very fortunate as we were heading into the pandemic to have already been experiencing double-digit growth year over year. And that was tremendously exciting. But then obviously we all know that when the pandemic happened, a lot of us were very fortunate to experience skyrocketing traffic. And so, we definitely realized that we needed to focus on this isn't going to be forever. Well, actually, we thought it was like 3 weeks to stop the curve.
That's right.
But preparing that it was not going to be for forever, we were really concerned with how are we going to bring these people back once this ends. Because one of the other things I think we all experienced in the pandemic, and it was talked a lot about this morning, is our attention is spread so thin across so many different platforms right now. And so our biggest concern was, okay, people are interested in this, what's going on right now, they're paying attention to the news, but when we go back to our normal lives, did Hulu take our original customers? And they're not spending their time on our platform anymore. So one of the big things that we really wanted to pay attention to was audience data, and we weren't so concerned about acting on it rather than just collecting it to be prepared for the inevitable. And so we're still very focused on that, and we're really deploying a lot of strategies in terms of how do we reach back out to these people, how do we bring them back into the fold. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of like thinking about our audiences and what's truly important from the perspective of the publisher. But when it got into the actual subscription itself, this was actually something that was already kind of in our roadmap and our plan, but it did make us pivot and expedite this strategy, which was that we didn't want a subscription just to be, hey, I want to read this piece. We didn't want to be talking at people constantly. We knew that a community was going to be critical to our future success, and so we really wanted to build engagement opportunities, whether that was live conference calls, whether that was interactive groups, you can deploy the Facebook groups, whether that was commenting in groups on your website of sorts, and really making sure that you got interaction opportunities with our writers. That was kind of always in our roadmap, but then it really became evident how much more people needed that in the pandemic, just feeling like they were part of some community. So we really started to expedite a lot of the work around that. And then, of course, everyone started talking about the cookie going away, which who knows if that's ever actually going to happen. I question Google every day. But then the switch to GA4 and all these other kind of crazy things that we needed to pay attention to. So we're really just trying to juggle all of these things, all of these user experiences, and making sure that we're kind of planning for the next step and maintaining that kind of interactive community. And I think that expediting that during the pandemic was one of the best things that we did, because even though now we're seeing traffic return to normal, actually we're seeing it far reduced. Kind of elephant in the room here is I'm a conservative news publisher. A lot of people have been pretty bummed out and don't want to read the news since 2020. So in trying to deal with this, we're seeing traffic actually decline from well, certainly pandemic norms, but even some pre-pandemic norms. But our growth of our subscription is actually much higher. And so we're very grateful that this community has proven out to bring significant value to the brand and the product.
Yeah. Speaking about the growth, I think I can only speak from personal experience, but I think there's an interest in seeing both sides of a story. So whether you're conservative or a more progressive publication like Hollywood Life is, or even the She Media community, there's just more interest in educating ourselves and wondering and understanding what other people are feeling, thinking, and doing and leaning. So interesting about the growth opportunity, because it's been a roller coaster the last couple of years. But Bonnie, you don't have a subscription-based product, and you do, but you do have a rabid audience, and your content is reliant on pop culture more than the news cycle. But pop culture is news these days. So tell us a little bit about how the last 2 years have been for you.
Yes, we've had a different experience, I think, from my other partners here up on stage, in that my audience is, very focused on entertainment news and on celebrities. They see particularly female celebrities as role models, and they very much personalize what goes on in the lives of celebrities and relate it to themselves, whether that's getting ideas for fashion, for hairstyle, but also how to conduct their relationships, their friendships, their romances. And so the pandemic, we found at very first, yes, our traffic went up just because people had nothing else to do, so they were on their phones and paying attention to what celebrities that we could find were doing. However, we're really driven by celebrities as role models and being out and about, whether they're out and about on the street, and in that case, when they were wearing masks, that's sort of problematic for audience, just because they can't see them, or out and about at events and red carpets, and being in new films coming out, new television. So that was really challenging for us to really service our audience during the pandemic. So we've really seen great growth in the last year as the world has reopened, and as our audience can get excited about the people that they really connect with. A good example is we just had a Kardashian wedding a couple of weeks ago. Kourtney Kardashian got married. I don't know how many of you are familiar with her, but for our audience, it was like a royal wedding. And fortunately, the Kardashians love publicity, and we were able to document the entire affair. And so, this really excites them. I think that there's been so much really frightening news from every front coming into their lives, and they look at Hollywood Life as a place that they can relax and they can be inspired by a world that is more glamorous and that they can aspire to. And so this kind of opening up again, as well as having the TV shows that they follow, like Stranger Things, back on the air, it gives them a sense of normality. So we've seen that that's been wonderful in terms of bringing audience back and traffic and engagement. But the thing that we've really focused on in the last year and a half is diving into our data, diving into the user experience, and working on ways to heighten the engagement, the experience through redesigning the architecture of our site, the page design. We introduced a new article page design about a month and a half ago, and we literally have seen traffic more than double in the last month in page views, just because we've made it so much more accessible and just easy to go through. And so we plan in the next 2 years to really continue those efforts to make our site reader-friendly and algorithm-friendly, because, coming from the print world, the first part of my career, you had to get your product, your magazine, into the hands, the consumer, but it was kind of easy if you had enough money to buy the pockets over the supermarket belts. Now, you have to surmise what the gods of Google and Facebook and all the other social media are up to in order to deliver your content to the audience. And so we're constantly looking for content distribution partners to get our content in front of eyeballs, because when it gets there, they're into it. When they can find it, they're really into it. And we're really working to we've seen like an improvement in loyalty, readers coming back, as we have improved our design and our architecture. And so we're going to keep honing in on that, and also looking for ways to get our stories, all of our content, our videos, everything in front of the eyeballs of our audience, and to make it sticky.
Yeah, diversification of traffic is something that we're always touting. Never rely on one source, because it could go away tomorrow, and some brands have seen that affect their business dramatically. And you are both singular publishers. Alex, you've got a diversification within your portfolio, so you can kind of shift things around there. But we are all beholden to what is the duopoly of Google and Facebook, the triopoly if you include Amazon in that. And Bonnie, I'm glad you mentioned, are we creating content for the platforms, or are we creating it for the audience? And the answer is yes. We're beholden to both, and you want to find the right mix that works for your business, keeping that diversification in mind. But the next 2 years are certainly going to be impacted by Google. We talked a bit in our prep for this about G4. My perspective is that the change in Google, we're all data-driven businesses. The way that Google has trained us to date on how to manipulate that data and interpret that data is going to change for everyone. So it's sort of leveling the playing field in terms of analysis in that space. But Alex, you had a good point of view on, obviously none of us wants to be beholden to Google, but what is your perspective on, what can we do about that? How can we diversify away from Google?
Yeah, I think that's,
Answer all of our questions.
Yeah. From our perspective, if there can be some sort of, I'm a fan of pre-bid. I'm assuming everybody in this room works with pre-bid in some fashion. It is a more open source way to approach monetization. That goes for everybody to understand that. But if we take that same approach to platform distribution, to monetization, I think there's a world where we're not beholden to any platform. I think at the end of the day, for publishers, we really need to own, for lack of a better word, but really command that relationship with our audience, because it is the lifeblood of our businesses. I think for the longest time, margins for publishers have been cut, and we've really been beholden to SEO strategies, which I think you should always be, focused on SEO, understand how you're communicating with your audience, depending on how that platform works. But to your earlier point, and I think in an earlier presentation talking about platforms like Vine, talking about platforms like Yo, these can change your business overnight. And if there was, and I'm more speaking to the crowd too, because I think there's a lot of smart people in here and tech providers, a more open sourced approach to how we can have distribution and content conversations for our consumers and our audience overall, I think that's really interesting. And I hate to keep it like totally nebulous on what that means outside of, there's a lot of conversations around data and how we can own that conversation. But I think the one thing I as a publisher, we want to make sure that we're careful about when we become beholden to a data provider or someone who's aggregating our data, they begin to potentially or to have the opportunity to take that power from that relationship that we're trying to really own. So that attributes to all of our publishing businesses and how we, whether that's monetization, but just generally the conversation, so we can curate a message that's as impactful as possible to our audience, ultimately generate revenue, but also retain that audience.
That's right. We're all businesses at heart, so we also are beholden to our advertisers and making sure that we're able to satisfy what they are intending to spend against. Garrett or Bonnie, how do you feel about this topic? I won't even focus specifically on Google, but just the democratization of data.
Well, the thing is that we all keep throwing around the word data. It's very important to distinguish, obviously, the two very big different pools of data that we're looking at right now. Obviously, one is audience data, very different than our website and our performance. To the smaller publishers out there that don't have huge SEO teams or that just don't have the time to think about these things, we have GA4 switchover coming up. Okay, so that's your website data right there. A lot of things that people don't really realize will be really important about that, like how are you tracking your conversions? You're gonna wanna switch that over from using the goals to the events. You know, it's kind of timely that we're doing this right now because of GA4. Like, you want to at least start tracking your stuff before July 1st of this year, because that's when we have to change over this time next year. So you want to be able to do apples to apples data. There are actually a lot of people aren't talking about this. Google's going to delete all of your historical data. You could offer them $1 billion. They're not going to be able to provide it to you. It will be gone. So then why is that important? Well, pre-pandemic norms, right? You don't just download 2 years of data and store it. You're going to want to know, what was my pre-pandemic norm? How am I doing today against the normal environment when things go back to normal, as they say? So I think that that's a really important thing that a lot of people need to be paying attention to, especially from the conversions, because it's going to really affect how you track all of your marketing spend, you know, all of your audience acquisition. And again, it's like kind of this crazy thing. We're all dependent on this, which most people use as a free tool from Google. So that's a little crazy. And then kind of flipping to the other side about your, if you want to use the buzzwords, zero party or first party audience data. And how you're deploying that and the value there. So we all do have to prepare for this cookie to eventually go away, as they say. And how are you going to be selling to your advertisers? Potentially, this is a really good opportunity for us to kind of take back the narrative and how ads are sold. Maybe this will actually see a direct boost for a lot of people. Maybe it'll be better partnerships in the kind of race to the bottom of the programmatic DSPs and SSPs for those, you know, premium quality publishers. So I do think that there's a lot of opportunity here. It's not like all bummer. There's hope. So I do think that, you know, that'll be a very important thing for us to pay attention to, and how we deploy this data to monetize it, but not just to monetize it, but also to enhance your user experiences, help grow your web traffic. I think it's really interesting that Bonnie was talking about rejiggering their page layout and really making it a better, more user-friendly experience. I think that, especially talking about individual audiences and data, you're going to want to focus on the person, right? Like, what do they want to consume? That's going to be your growth opportunity, not just kind of how can I squeeze out an extra, you know, $1.50 RPM on this page. So, yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot around all of that, and so that's how we're going to have to focus on it, on the data, all the data.
Totally agree. Yeah, it is much more about the customer journey than just the, you know, flash in the pan experiences. Like, as soon as you grab them, how many page views can you get out of them? And building those relationships for sure. And I'm glad, you know, Bonnie, we don't have to go into like a doomsday scenario of like, what do I do with my data? Because as part of She Media, we are capturing.
We're counting on you.
We're doing that for our publishers.
We'll be talking more, a lot more.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit because we are close. But where's Steve? Giving me a nod or anything? We've got a minute or two.
We should go to Q&A in a minute.
Great. So we can go to Q&A directly on that. I think that the GA.
Can I mention one other thing, no?
Please
In
do.
terms of something that, you know, I don't think any of us have brought up, but that's coming up in the next 2 years. Because, you know, we're looking ahead to our reader behavior and how our reader, our audience of women, basically, we have a large audience of women 20 to 45, and how they are about to be affected in this country. And in about a month and a half, beginning of July, about half of our audience is going to lose their opportunity for reproductive choice. And our audience really cares about these things. And I don't know how, that could be a huge phenomena in terms of what they're doing, how they're feeling. I mean, we mentioned Black Lives Matter and the repercussions of that on society. What is this going to do when 50% of society doesn't have the same rights? And they're my audience. And then we've got elections coming up in the midterms, and are we going to have democracy after that? So these are just like really big trends that I think are going to affect everybody's business, and certainly my business.
I think not just our businesses, but our employees and our team and our staff. And we feel it intensely, and we feel it coming. So I think if anything, there's a shared experience happening. Misery loves company. I don't know. We will see where that road leads, and hopefully use our voices for good. Right. That's the other point, is to elevate voices in our communities that are talking about it, and our publishers that are producing that content.
Let's see what questions we have. Anybody want to drill into any of these answers, or poke at any of our speakers?
We're here.
Sorry.
Omar.
Thanks. Being blinded.
Hey guys, I'm representing a publisher in Patheos, Believe Net, and Family Today that focuses on the demographic is about 65% female. And one of the things that I was asking, probably best to you, Bonnie, is how does your direct sales team find advertisements for that audience? It seems like it makes more sense sometimes to direct salespeople to just go after the easy male 18 to 35 audience instead of focusing on the actual female. So I just wanted to see the strategy that your team has on that.
Well, I actually have to shift that over to Deb, because they do all of our advertising, and I think that they think very hard about that, because, female consumers spend so much money. They spend at least as much, if not more, money than that male consumer, and they often are the deciders of where the family money is spent, whether it's from buying a home to everything in the home and everything for their kids and themselves.
Yeah. We have she in our name, and we're a top 5 ComScore lifestyle property. So our conversations are more obviously geared toward reaching women online, and we reach, I think the stat is basically 50% of all women online are reachable across the She Media audience. And so our sales team is very adept at seeking out those dollars that are looking to attract that audience. But it is a strategic decision. Our sales team is experienced in knowing the brands, the agencies, and attracting those dollars directly. So I think maybe it's just a false assumption that there's an appetite to reach more men online, because we certainly wouldn't be in business without being able to reach women online. We also, as part of Penske Media, there are corporate initiatives, and so we have this we have the benefit of the holistic audience approach. So if people want to reach the men that are going to, I don't know, Rolling Stone versus Hollywood, the women going to Hollywood Life, they can do that through, the benefit of our scale. I think that conversation changes when you're talking about an individual independent publisher like National Review. So I don't know if you want to maybe add some color to that.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough call being an individual publisher, because when you start, really starting to hone in on the audience targeting, obviously you're going to lose that scale that you're talking about. There's plenty of companies out there that can help you with audience extension, but especially when you're selling to a direct advertiser, they really are more interested in getting your audiences while they're on your property. But you can also, and one thing we've discussed internally, is working with a lot more of like-minded, very similar properties where maybe the advertiser would be more enticed. Partnering with very similar organizations to our own, just to say, well, what if we, cross-sell? or at the very least, let us, pass our data along and retarget. Obviously, there's a lot of concerns about how that'll work in the future, and we're trying to work our way through that now. Which is why I'm focused more on just growing my own universe. A lot of the changes that are coming, people, forget. I think in 1 year, not too long ago, Google gave like 3,000 updates to its search algorithm. Okay, how do you even keep up with that? But a lot of the things that we are going to focus on is what the future is. I mean, we're talking about the next 2 years. So we're focused on a lot of the insights that'll help just drive and grow our audiences as people start really paying attention to political news, especially. And then obviously I'm not in editorial, so I don't direct this, but I always encourage, when editorial plans for their year, thinking about, okay, well, how do you want to reach those demographics and how do you want to grow them? I'm just trying to think about what the 2-year out looks like right now and hope that we can bring in large enough audiences that we have a big enough universe to implement such targeting.
I have a really quick lightning round exit question. Since all three of you mentioned data and analytics and better understanding of audiences, in practical terms, where are you actually making those investments so that you're focusing on those? Is it a matter of building an in-house data structure? Is it a matter of partnering with third-party firms? How are you actually investing in data and audience analytics?
For me right now, I'm focused much more on my own first and zero-party audience data. That shouldn't serve as a surprise to anybody because instead I was really focused on growing my subscriptions. Yes, we do have advertising as well, but subscriptions are the bread and butter. So we really want to make sure that those user experiences are also personalized. So the real focus for me has been on the CDP rather than worrying about audience extension. So we partner with a great company called Bewkes. We've actually been with them since 2016, 2017. I brought them on very early on in my days at National Review. And they've been phenomenal. They even served as our original paywall. We've needed to step up the product a little bit in terms of the user experience. So we do invest in paywall partner as well that everyone is plugging into this customer data platform. So it's really more investing in your own personal data warehouse, at least from my perspective.
We have a lot of data. We've always had a lot of data on Hollywood Life through, basically through our Google Analytics and some other internal programs that we have. Our issue is more being able to analyze it, that we didn't have anybody who was trained on our staff to analyze the data in the depth that we needed. And so since we've become independent, that's something that we've focused on, and it's through bringing on an outside firm that really specializes in this to help us. And the learnings that we're getting beyond what we knew have been just so tremendously helpful. So we plan to continue that. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with needing the right person to look at data. Data, you can easily get lost in the sauce. You could look at it and think you know one thing, but if you don't look at it correctly, it doesn't mean anything. So I think we're at a point where we do rely on third parties, and it's not centralized in the way that I would envision it to be. Data warehousing is absolutely a good solution and certainly something we're doing for GA4. But I think data, I don't have a full-on solution, and I think I'm still looking for what works best in the marketplace. I know I'm hitting on the decentralized solutions. That kind of world, if we can bring that mentality to the data marketplace and then also pollinate that data to help publishers collectively, I think that could be really interesting. So.
Deb, Garrett, Bonnie, Alex, thanks so much. Deb is going to be leading a roundtable at the end of the morning, specifically on selling diversity to advertising. So please thank our panel.
Thanks.
Thank you.